Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Chris Schoolis from State of Flux, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you today to our annual Supplier Management Summit. Thank you for attending today. We've gathered a great group of professionals with many different perspectives on supplier management, so it's sure to be time well spent. The State of Flux team bringing this broadcast to you are myself, Management Consultant, Steve Neary, Managing Director of North America, and our founder and chairman, Alan Day. So now to kick things off, let's review the agenda. Alan Day will review the results of the 2021 survey. I know many of you have been participating in our survey for quite some time, and seeing the shifts in SRM after such a disruption like COVID should be particularly meaningful. Then Steve Neary will be facilitating a panel discussion with procurement leaders from 3 companies that are all focusing on SRM in different ways and are at different stages of the journey. Chevron, American Electric Power, and Kellogg. To finish, we will have a Q&A session with our panelists fielded by Alan. Throughout today's conversation, we do have the chat function operating, so I encourage you to use this to tap into the wealth of knowledge that we have on hand for you. We will be answering your questions in the Q&A session near the end of today's summit, so please feel free to type away throughout the webinar. Just a note, we also will be recording today's webinar. So with the world awakening from enforced COVID lockdowns, we're all walking a tightrope of uncertainty. Have we made the right decisions over the last 18 months? How prepared were we for the disruption? Are we prepared to weather another storm? We meet today in a time of extraordinary complexity. How our supply chains adapt to forced market changes will determine our future business success. These questions are at the core of State of Flux's Supplier Management Summit for 2021. At State of Flux, we bring together supplier management strategy and technology to help our clients thrive. We've continued to refine our approach based on the responses from our world-leading annual survey, which started in 2009. The findings of the 2021 edition is what has brought us all together today. Now as we begin, I'd like to formally introduce Alan, whom some of you may already know personally. Alan founded State of Flux in 2004 and has traveled the world providing global business with his insight. He has set up State of Flux offices in the UK, North America, Australia, and New Zealand. Alan will take us through the 13th edition of our annual global market research. This year, we focus on the theme of growing and protecting value. This means reaching past the price and reaching for collective benefit. As usual, the research has uncovered some powerful insights. We'll get a better understanding of how the world's best manage their suppliers, create resilient supply chains, and realize the full potential of their supplier partnerships. Alan will now take us through the highlights of this year's research.
Lovely to talk to you. And thank you, Christine. I wanted to take a few minutes to thank our co-host today, Kellogg, who we've been lucky enough to partner with for quite a number of years now, and especially Shelley Van Treek, the CPO, and Leslie, who you'll hear from later today. So thank you so much for all your help and support. In advance, a big thank you to all our amazing speakers. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. And of course, a huge thank you to everyone who participated in this year's research. We really wouldn't be able to do these studies and the books without your input. And we really appreciate it. We don't take it for granted. We know how busy you are, and we really value your time and effort that you put into doing that research. On that note, if you did do the research and you've not yet had your benchmark, please reach out, because we're happy to a time to run through your research results and give you those. And if you didn't do the survey and you want to benchmark, let us know and we'll happily open up the survey so that you can do that. As Christine would have said, this is our 13th year. We're now up to nearly 2.75 million data points from well over 2,000 organizations. So it's fairly amazing from that perspective. And in this year's book, if you could just flick to the next slide, please, Christine. I think we've got some logos there. We've got some amazing case studies, which I'd thoroughly encourage you to read from quite a range of sectors and organizations. A number of these brands you hopefully will know. Intuit, who make QuickBooks, and of course have just completed on a massive transaction with MailChimp. Electrolux, the appliance manufacturer. AMP Capital is an Australian-based insurer. Skanska is a European construction company. Allied Irish Bank, probably the clues in the name. Most of you will know Kelly Services, and Yonder is a data center. We've also in this year's book got an interesting interview with a chap called Adrian Clements, who was the former Chief Risk Officer for ArcelorMittal, which is the global steel and mining organization. And then on the flip side, so clearly we're looking with Adrian on risk, and then a fantastic interview with Nikhil Pava, who's been heading supplier innovation for one of the world's largest technology businesses, which I'm sure you all use on a fairly regular basis. So those are what's in the book this year. But and so I'd encourage you to, after this, we'll send you the link and you can download that book and enjoy it. Next slide, please, Christine. In terms of results this year, you'll see that there's a real spread of organizations, roughly half coming from Europe, fairly large percentage coming from North America and Australasia. For those of you who are very quick at maths, you'll realize that that is only 95%, and the balance really came from Asia Pac, a little bit from Southern Africa and South America. So predominantly what we're finding is you need to be pretty mature in procurement before you start getting into supplier management. So those are the results. And interestingly, more than half of the people responding were over CPO levels. So that was fairly interesting. Now, we put these numbers up. These are completed responses. You could probably add another 250 on that on partial completion of survey responses. So a huge amount of data. And as I said, it takes us well over 2.75 million data points in survey data. Next slide. So you'll see this year, and in terms of, we look at all the results based on the 6 pillars, and I will talk to you about these results in the 6 pillars. For those of you who have attended these in the past, you'll know that this is how we break down supplier management. This year, you'll see that leaders comprise of 44 organizations, so roughly 12%. And to be a leader, you need to be in the established group for 4 or more of those 6 key pillars. A fast follower for 3 of those. So you'll see that we've still got a large majority of people, just nearly 70% in the follower group. The key thing with these 6 pillars is that you need to work on all 6 to make the program not just work, but to embed it into your organization. So that's the absolute key kind of point to make to you all, is all 6 need to be worked on. And traditionally, and this year is no different, technology and people have been our lowest areas as an industry, and I'm afraid we're back there again with technology and people. So for 13 years, those are our work-ons, and they continue to be so. So we will spend a bit of time. However, this year's theme is around value. So I'm going to spend most of my time talking to you about value of SRM. Next slide, please, Christine. So I covered kind of the 6 pillars, that key point to work on all 6. the major mistake that people make, and it's worth noting this, and don't worry, it's not irreparable if you fall into this. But the key mistake that procurement tends to make is they go, let's do supplier management. I'll start writing a process, and they go straight to that governance piece. And what we find there is that then really doesn't resonate with the wider organization. So these 6 pillars are in order. The only one that you could probably implement slightly earlier is technology, and I'll cover that. We'll get to the technology piece, but these 6 pillars are in order of how you should approach them in terms of implementation. So we'll move into the value pillar with the next slide, please. So value, and I don't want to bore you with statistics. These presentations will be available to you, but there is some key highlights that I would like to kind of pull out here. More than 3/4 of the leaders are getting benefits of 3 to 6%, which is pretty key, and that you'll see that risk is a key business driver. Now, clearly in the pandemic world, that shouldn't be any surprise to most of you, but it's really coming through in the numbers. But so there are benefits in that, but risk is a key driver. And what I really would highlight is if you're struggling to get kind of an audience with your executive team, if you're struggling to get your business case, then absolutely use risk as your kind of key driver for that business case. Now, a couple of things to note. When we look at how we define value for supply management, 80% of organizations have cost reduction, but only 40% have kind of things like risk or social value in there. So again, if you look at what's on your CEO's radar, it'll be things like risk, sustainability, social value. Yes, price, but that's almost a hygiene factor now. And what we find is what sells the program is those wider benefit-driven things. So as we've said, and you'll see the New Zealand government, who's one of the case studies in this year, in terms of they talk about the value proposition needs to change. And I wouldn't say that's just for government procurement. I think that's for all procurement. We can't be still running RFPs. We need to be focusing on a wider value and the relationship more so. Next slide, please. So a couple of points here, and for me, the key one is that leaders get more value, and it sounds kind of silly, but we're seeing it in the results. You'll see that leaders are getting more commitment and support from supplier senior management, collaborative problem solving, proactive ideas for continuous improvement, access to market intelligence, scarce resource, all those things that we've needed to use over the last 18 months with the pandemic. And I think the other piece really to highlight to you is leaders more than twice as likely to get or accept and manage risk from their supply management program. So for me, that is an absolute key driver in the current program. So again, we need to look at that business case, and your value proposition needs to change from buying to risk, innovation, and value. So we need to change our language or lexicon as an industry to talk about risk, innovation, and value, not just price savings, because I think now we've got to the maturity level where people understand that, and as I said, see it as a hygiene factor. Next slide, please. There's a couple of things I found really interesting in the results, and they were sort of buried in the results, but but I kind of wanted to really highlight them to you because they were quite compelling when I saw them. I mentioned that leaders get more benefit. Well, what's interesting is leaders improve their speed to market. They're 5 times as likely over followers to have improved speed to market. I mean, that's huge. So, if, in this nimble world where we're introducing new products to address the market, the fact that you're 5 times more likely to have an improved speed to market is just huge. Another one is leaders improve profit is nearly 3 times more than followers, and growth of sales and revenue is nearly 3 times more as well. So they're sort of buried in the results, but for me, those are really, really compelling when we look at where we need to change our value proposition as procurement. So hopefully you'll make notes of those and use those internally yourself, but I thought they were super compelling from this year's results. So yeah, please make sure. The other one is leaders are twice as likely, again, for supplier innovation. So not only are we getting more innovation, we're twice as much innovation, but you're 5 times as likely to get it to market as well. So hugely compelling. I mean, if you want to talk to your sales organization and tell them those stats, they'll bite your arm off. So please make sure you're using those and using those in the right way to help sell your supply management value within the organization. Next slide, please. What I would ask you to do on this particular slide is I've got an article in this year's report just talking about that shifting role of procurement and how we're kind of moving away from the kind of find, keep, and really more on the grow and protect value. So please, again, I'll encourage you to read that and build it into your programs. I think the key one for me is looking at your horizon for procurement and making sure you're strategic. And I've got a point on the next slide from that. But I think we need to move from that kind of find value, keep value to growing and protecting value as well. So that's where my kind of key recommendation is. Next slide, please, Christine. So summary on value, and I've mentioned about being strategic, but the key thing is our horizon. Is our horizon strategic? Are we actually positioning things at the right level? And I'll give you an example from one of our clients. It was an oil and gas organization. It was in the Asia Pacific region, and their chief procurement officer, as part of their supply management program, had briefed their CEO about a program that she wanted to initiate, and that was about putting solar panels on the top of the service stations or gas stations, so that when people fuel up with gas, their service station was energy neutral. And so the CEO went to meet the CEO of the energy provider. Whilst that was part of the conversation became, we need a new port, let's co-invest in that. The conversation became, we would like to buy this asset off you, would you like to buy that asset off us? So our horizon as procurement, although it was interesting, wasn't as strategic as the two CEOs when they got together. So let's make sure that we are being strategic when we position our programs. Not only that, remember that supply management is a business change program led by procurement, not a procurement change program. So please, again, make sure that you're positioning it in that way. And what I would say is never waste a good crisis. So we've got here promote risk management. Remember, what is happening to you in terms of risk is also happening to your suppliers. So all those things that you're experiencing, your suppliers are experiencing. In our experience, we've seen that most people only manage it from their internal view, and don't look at how those risk impacts are actually affecting your suppliers or even your suppliers' suppliers and so on. So have a look at that. And finally, we're talking about seeing is believing. So actually, use your business case to kind of help with that sales pitch. I'm going to paraphrase Tom Cruise's Jerry Maguire. And it's not show me the money, it's show me the value and the wider positioning of value. So hopefully we've moved on to show me the value. So that's value, and as I said, it's the theme for this year's book. Clearly, we're conscious that a lot of organizations are either at the beginning of their program or need to reinvigorate their program. So value is, and being able to articulate that value is really important. The next pillar, which is on the next slide, is around engagement. So we can just move. Thank you. And there's a couple of things here. And the first one I just want to come up with is you'll see a big 99% there on the screen. And look, it's simple. To be a supplier management leader, you need to get executive support. And it's not just endorsement, it's strong and active support is what we're seeing. So, you can't get more of a direct correlation between 99% of leaders get senior management and exec level support for their supplier management program. So you want to be a leader, get executive support, full stop. The other thing that that leaders do and followers don't is that leaders have communicated their supplier management program to suppliers, and this is a key one, and the supplier understands it. So I use the term, what's your supplier management sales pitch? Other people call it value proposition. But the key thing is communicating what supplier management is for your organization and getting your suppliers to actually understand it. One of the key tools that we see in engagement, and funnily enough, people often, especially when they're starting their programs, they forget that one of the key stakeholders here is their suppliers. I'd really encourage you to run a voice of the supplier there, and you'll see. And what we mean by voice of the supplier is not anecdotal feedback from your suppliers on whether they like you or not. It's actually structured, repeatable measurement on whether you are a customer of choice for your key suppliers. And I'm sure, not to lead the witness here, but I'm sure a number of you can ask Leslie how she uses Voice of the Supplier in Kellogg's program as we go forward. But you'll see that, again, leaders, 76% of leaders use Voice of the Supplier compared to 23% of followers. And frankly, when I drill into the followers, often they've answered yes in the survey, but in reality, all they've done is have a chat to their suppliers. So it's pretty important to do that voice of the supplier. And the reason being is it focuses your energy on those things that make a strategic improvement, but also it helps you with your internal business case. It's not you saying you need to change, it's your suppliers. Next slide, please, Christine. So quick summary for engagement. And again, there's a lot more information in the book. Involve your wider business and build relationships, not just with suppliers, but internally as well. The key thing is to make this a business program. So we need to communicate it and manage it. Sell stakeholders on the value and get stakeholders to know where you are on your supplier management journey and how they link all the way through that journey and get visibility of what it's doing. And then, of course, involve suppliers. I've got a couple of great examples. I've picked on Harley Davidson. We may have Kip on the line, but they have a fantastic supplier board, where the suppliers help them look at different innovation to include in their product. And then McLaren Formula One, those Formula One fans, they actually, not only do they kind of involve suppliers in innovation, but they'll also bring the cars to the suppliers, to the factory floors of those suppliers, and show the suppliers how that part is used in the car to get their ideas on how they could make it better, more effective, lighter, and so on. So it's pretty cool. So please involve your suppliers. The luxury brands have a term around in terms of supplier loyalty, and I don't hear that from the big brands. So one of the things that I'd ask you to think about is, how are you building supplier loyalty in your organization? What does that program look like? Next slide, because we can start looking at how we build supplier loyalty, and not just that, the whole supply management program. So governance, and we look at governance and process in this pillar. Almost everyone says that they segment their suppliers. Everyone tells us they do it, but not many people do it that well. So most people are only using criticality and spend as their segmentation criteria. The good programs are using between 10 and 15 different criteria for segmentation. And one simple one to think about is, does the supplier even want to work with you as a strategic supplier? Some of them won't. Some of them will see you as a, sorry to use a marketing term, but a cash cow or exploit type customer. So why would we try and do joint go-to-market or collaboration exercises with people that don't see us as a strategic customer? So I'd ask you to look at your segmentation criteria. And then the other thing is what we call treatment strategies. And again, leaders tend to define what that segmentation or even sub-segment means and how they're going to treat them. Followers don't. So again, if you want to be a leader, map out what your treatment strategies are, and then of course how your processes follow. There's a couple of scary stats here. Risk for followers is only at 13% for roughly 75 to 100% of their strategic suppliers. So it's really low. Whereas on the flip side, leaders tend to have the core building blocks in place. So they tend to have effective contract performance and risk management programs in place to help build that supply management program. So the next slide, please, Christine. So the key part here is build that foundation around, and I talked about what the leaders are doing around contract performance, risk, and they're absolutely key. And then make sure that you use good, wide criteria for your segmentation. So we talked about opportunity and risk here, and for me, those are pretty key pieces. One of the things that I noticed, and in the differentiate point there, is how are you actually differentiating your program and what you're doing within your relationships. I had an interesting conversation with an insurer about their supply management program, and they were having trouble getting executive engagement. And what was interesting about it is just going onto their website and looking at their annual report, their stated objective from their CEO was to target small to medium customers. So what we did is we actually changed the angle of the supply management program away from the very large suppliers to be far more kind of centrally focused on small to medium suppliers and how they were going to support those And that, of course, then resonated far more with the executive and changed the whole program. So make sure you use those to tie into how your program is going to align with the strategic objectives. Next, we'll just look at people. And one of the things I would say on governance, things I will point out is that in terms of leaders, they do tend to map out the organizational structure for how they're going to face off to the supplier. And leaders, and you'll see this in the people results, leaders do define the skills and competency for supplier management in that organizational structure. The challenge is, so to be a leader, you need to define your skills and your competency. The challenge for leaders and everyone else, in fact, is that at the moment we tend to focus on what procurement's roles are in supplier management, and we need to expand that to the wider business. You know, if you take someone in your operational business, roughly 10% of their job may be supplier management. So it's not all their job, but they may be interfacing with a supplier. So question is, where is it that in their job description? Where's the role definition for it? Where's the competency? Does their boss look for it? Have they received training? This is only going to work in terms of supplier management. We're only going to embed it into the organization when it gets embedded into people's roles and objectives. So I would encourage everyone not just to look at procurement skills competency, but actually when you map out your governance structure, which will include the wider business, make sure you look at those roles that operational and even executives play in that governance structure. Now, will you ever train an executive? Maybe not, but you can certainly educate them. So making sure that that not only are you kind of mapping out the skill sets, but you're also training. And you'll see that just over half of the followers said that no training's been provided in the last 12 months. So again, another direct correlation. Leaders train their people. And what are the key skills? Well, two of the key ones is strategic thinking, and number one was communication. So not functional training, but behavioral training. And when I look at some of the supplier management programs, we're still doing that traditional procurement thing of focusing on functional, not behavioral. So short answer, train your people. And when we go to the next slide, if you could move forward, please, you'll see that you've gone the other way again, that training people is absolutely critical. So I think we've gone forward 2 there. But anyway, my message to you is train your people and develop organizational charts for the relationship and have the job descriptions for those roles. So those are the key things. In terms of technology, there's 7 areas of technology that we look for in supplier management programs. One is onboarding, so supplier onboarding, contract management, performance management is the third one, risk management, relationship, innovation, and sustainability, or ESG. So those are the 7 that we look for. What's interesting is roughly 40% of organizations aren't using any technology, and especially around relationship management. The most common is again Excel, which is pretty scary. Now, what I would say is things like onboarding and contract management are almost hygiene pieces of technology that the business expects us to already have automated or close to automated. So when you're looking at technology and when you're trying to sell it, those are not kind of the things to sell it on. Really, it's around performance, risk, relationship, innovation, sustainability that you want to sell your kind of technology focus on it. A key thing here is when we ask can people quantify the benefit of technology? Only 8% of organizations are able to quantify it. Now, I would just kind of put a caveat on that. The key thing here is technology underpins your program. If you don't have technology, you can't scale the program. So actually calling that out separately for a business case is the wrong approach. You need to wrap it in as a crucial part of your program and make it more as part of the program. So in summary, it's time to get off Excel. That's a I was going to say a drug us and procurement need to get off, but certainly we need to retire Excel. It is that, as I said, it is the hacker's tool of choice. I've got an amazing article if anyone wants to read it about how hackers use Excel. But for us, it means that you can't scale your program. You can't, once you get past about 6 or 7 key suppliers, your spreadsheets will just get too big, too unwieldy, and of course, no one can ever understand anyone else's spreadsheet. So move away from Excel and move more into your combined technology and make it part of your wider program. Also on that, what I would say is think about your audience. Your audience for supply management is really the operational stakeholders and the wider business. It's not really procurement. So trying to use your procurement technology or your ERP to do a role that they're not really designed for, I wouldn't recommend. Really focus on how you can use technology to engage those 2 key audiences of operational and supplier stakeholders. And as I said, make that business case part of your wider program. So I would focus that around risk, innovation, performance, sustainability, and relationship. And what we're seeing is that a lot of organizations are now using the technology as the change agent. So the good thing there is when you embed it in parallel with your process, and you only get your stakeholders to change once. Whereas if you put your process in and then look to automate it, which is the sort of traditional way of doing it, then actually what ends up happening is your stakeholders have to change twice. So hopefully I've covered technology to its nth degree, and we can look at collaboration and how you can use all of the 5 things in collaboration. So if we could just move to the next slide, please. So for collaboration, again, leaders collaborate, full stop. 98% of organizations are saying that their supply management program in terms of leaders has improved their supplier collaboration, and nearly 70% of them are saying it's increased greatly in terms of collaboration. So yeah, absolutely key. You'll also see, and I talked earlier about the benefits, customer of choice benefits and leaders. And this has been interesting over the 3 years. So the savings numbers have stayed relatively the same. Leaders get between 3 and 6% additional benefit over above the contract. But what has grown over the 13 years is really those customer of choice benefits. So those have been a huge kind of benefit to leaders actually. And you'll see nearly 70% of organizations said trust in the relationship has been increased. I'd just like to, I know, I'm sure there's a few attendees from Mars here. We're lucky enough to do some work with Mars. And when we run the voice of the supplier there, one of the key focuses is on trust with their key suppliers. And we talk about executive engagement, that trust goes to the Mars family. So they're so interested in how trusted Mars are by their suppliers that they take the output of it. So one of the, we know it's a key driver. How do you improve trust? Well, you share information, you're more open, and you involve suppliers earlier in your discussion. So yeah, trust we see as an absolute critical piece. And then leaders put joint account plans in place for their strategic suppliers. So most followers, sort of nearly 90%, don't have joint account plans in place, whereas leaders do. So again, I'd recommend, if you're not familiar with the joint account plan, come and talk to us, but we can talk to you about how they put those benefits in place and help you drive what we call value release activities. You could just flick to we're almost through the 6 pillars. So the key thing here is it's not just collaboration, it's about proactive collaboration. It doesn't happen on its own. You need to put the building blocks in place, the processes, and the other 5 pillars to make that collaboration happen. I talked about openness and transparency, and that's how you build trust. And the key focus around customer of choice. And really, this is our X factor for supply management. This is what gives you the kind of increased benefits over and above money, basically. So yeah, I would, and the first thing you've got to do is start measuring whether you're a customer of choice before you can start improving it. So that covers the 6 pillars. We wouldn't be a survey in the modern times without covering a few slides or a few questions on COVID, and I'll just talk through those very briefly. So if you could just flick to the next slide, please. You'll see that what's interesting here is 70% of organizations have reported that COVID has kind of increased their organization's focus on supplier management. There's a couple of things that say there. One is, now is the time for your business case. So supplier management is on your executive team's radar because of COVID, because of Suez Canal, and so on. So let's use it. As I said, don't waste a good crisis. The other bit that I would say on this number is, what were the other 30% doing? Because I would have said it's a key driver for every organization right now. But anyway, that's a key thing. And the other thing is, and I love this piece, 2/3 of our respondents are saying that relationship management is the most effective way of mitigating risk from COVID-19 or supply chain risk. So it's the relationship that we need to rely on. So if that doesn't help your business case, I don't know what will. But really, that for me is an absolute gem that you can use in your business case, is that the relationship is what you need to get through these bumps in the supply chain. So I'll leave you with that. I do have a slide just in summary. If we could just go to the next slide, and then I will hand you to Steve for a poll yourself. But the key one is act now. You've never had a better time for a business case for either implementing or improving your supplier management. So do it. You've got the air of the business. Make sure you do it. Look at the relationships, but you need the basics and relationships. So when you're selling your program or your improved program, yes, sell it on the relationship, but make sure you include improving performance management, risk management, contract management, because we know from the results that most organizations need to put effort into improving this. And I think the last bit is use technology. You can't scale your program to go across all your suppliers without technology, so you really need to use it. So that's it. I'm hopefully I haven't bored you too much with statistics, but please read the book and enjoy. Thank you. Steve, over to you. Oh, sorry, I've got a call to action here. So I'll apologies, and I even have notes about call to action, and I forgot that I had that slide. So I think I covered most of these, but about getting that value proposition to organizations' strategic objectives, explore the financial and non-financial, so talk about customer of choice benefits, use that voice of supplier to act on genuine supplier insights. I talked about treatment strategies. Again, if you don't understand what we mean by treatment strategies, either ask us a question in the question piece or feel free to contact us afterwards. We need those wider skill sets and embedding it, use technology and focus on the relationship. So those are your kind of call to action from this year's results. Over to you, Steve.
All right, thanks, Alan. Really good insights from our research this year. Hi, everyone, welcome. My name is Steve Neri, MD for State of Flux North America. For those of you who don't know who I am, thanks again for joining us today. So before we get started with our panelists, we'd like to change things up a bit and have you take a quick poll that's accessible via your GoToWebinar pane. We're asking for you to identify your top 3 priorities for 2022, which cover things like cost and risk reduction, innovation, supplier management, and supply chain resilience. A little bit later during the Q&A, Alan will circle back on the highlights of the responses that we collect from you. So we'll keep this open for about 10 more seconds, and then we'll get into our panelist discussion. So if you could make your way over, there is a section in the GoToWebinar pane where you can list your top priorities for next year. I'll just give everyone a second to complete that. Okay. So moving on, and with that being said, after almost 2 years dominated by a global pandemic, it's time for us to examine how procurement and supply chain professionals can get value creation back on track by really finding, nurturing, and protecting it. For the next part of our summit, we'll chat with some wonderful individuals who are here to share their supplier management journeys for their organizations. After finishing up with our last group, we'll wrap up with about a 20-minute Q&A, so feel free to submit questions using the questions pane. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first guests. This year, Chevron harnessed their global resources in the support of State of Flux to collaborate on the creation of a supplier management framework. The framework links directly to their drive to competitive performance and to truly differentiate the relationship types they need in order to achieve their strategic objectives in a challenging market. This has led to a refreshed and more consistent approach to supplier management by creating improved alignment between relationships managed at the global and business unit level. Please welcome Justin Hopkins, advisor, and Matthew Edwards, manager with Chevron's Category Management Center of Excellence. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's get into it. So let's go back to the start. Where did your supplier management journey begin? Was there a pivotal time or event that kicked off the change for Chevron, or was it more of a dawning realization?
Yeah. So Steve, you know, we've really been on a supplier management journey for quite some time now. You know, and we've had elements of supplier management being practiced for several years. We've been historically more focused on our category management framework for probably over a decade. And supplier management has always been a key aspect to that framework. But, you know, we've had elements of supplier management, you know, practices and tools and applications spread throughout Chevron, throughout the organization, you know, in one way, shape, or form. And, you know, well, if we're honest with ourselves, we've seen some really good pockets of good practices and good tools in some areas and in some business units. Some practitioners are better at it than others. We've also seen some opportunities for improvement. We've seen some opportunities for enhancement as well. And I think, you know, just recently we've come to the realization that, you know, a consistent and unified approach to supplier management has been a bit lacking here. And hence we could be kind of leaving a little bit of value on the table, and we recognize that. And I think the challenges over the past couple of years, particularly with COVID and the oil price volatility that we've seen, have created a greater urgency and a greater need to partner more strategically with our suppliers, and kind of help enhance and ensure that level of supply chain resiliency and effectiveness that we'd like to have in an environment that we've seen over the past couple of years. So, you know, our leadership here has always recognized that, you know, having strong partnerships with our suppliers has been a very important aspect of our business. But I think it's over the past 18 to 24 months that we've really seen an elevated prioritization into that a whole lot more. And that's probably brought on through, you know, through COVID and the oil price environment and the supply chain challenges we've seen. So we also, you know, from a cost management standpoint and a value extraction standpoint, you know, like with most companies and most industries, we recognize that, you know, delivering sustained value from, you know, regular sourcings and negotiations alone is just not going to cut it anymore. I mean, recognizing that just focusing on that as a strategy to create value is getting fewer and far between. The opportunities are getting lesser and lesser, and so there has to be more. And we see that through focusing on the collaborative relationships that we have with strategic suppliers, on enhancing that collaboration, enhancing those relationships. And you know, we recognize this has been a bit of an evolutionary journey for us here for quite some time, but it's just as of recently that the prioritization and the recognition that there's some opportunities to enhance it further and really elevate the value that we've seen from our relationships has come to fruition. So you know, that's probably been a bit of the journey for us with supplier management, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, right now the oil and gas industry is facing some large challenges. How are you aligning the value of supplier management to address them?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So, I mean, the oil and gas business is complex, and I think, you know, whether we're dealing with the changing commodity price environment that Justin mentioned, whether we're challenged or dealing with local business issues and some very difficult operating conditions, or indeed the broader kind of energy transition that we find ourselves in now, I think, you know, our supply partners are always critical. And I think effective supply management is important no matter what kind of challenges we're facing. You know, at Chevron, you know, when we look at supply management, we're looking for a program that ultimately drives value beyond the current contractual obligations that we have. You know, we're looking to align our program with our organization's most important objectives and metrics, and for a program that's going to provide a sustainable value over the long term. And I think, you know, through our program, you know, we're looking to partner to drive innovation and ultimately remove costs from our system. And I think if we can be effective in doing so, we're going to improve outcomes and overcome challenges, whatever environment we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now Matt, so how does the Center of Excellence concept work in such a highly federated organization where much of the decision making regarding supplier management is at the business unit level for Chevron?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, at Chevron, we do have a relatively decentralized operating model in which individual business units have authority around key decisions. You know, within our team, we look at these businesses as our key customers, and it's our role to understand their needs, provide them with solutions that meet their business objectives. And then to Alan's point, when we're talking about our customers, we're thinking about both our procurement practitioners, but more importantly, our operational customers in the field. You know, and as a center of excellence, you know, we partner with these businesses to develop solutions and leverage, I guess, both internal and external practices, and hopefully provide them with tools that they can be used and applied across our company. And I think the work that we've been undertaking in the last, you know, 12 months is a good example of this. You know, we did a lot of engagement. We've gained clear alignment with our customers to focus in this space. And that's really enabled ourselves to commit time and resources to this particular effort. You know, we developed a working team with participants both from our Center of Excellence and our business units. And I think that kind of teaming has allowed us to develop tools and approaches that are going to drive consistency and add value, but also provide sufficient flexibility to meet the different challenges that they face across the world. And then also, you know, within Chevron, we're developing a pretty strong, rich feedback culture. And I think over time, as we reach out for that feedback and receive it, you know, from our procurement practitioners, as well as our kind of end business unit users, we're going to get good feedback. We're going to respond to that. And ultimately, we're going to evolve our program to better able and support our business customers into the future. So I think that's going to be really important as we move ahead and have this framework adopted.
Great. Great. And we have one last question for you. I've got to ask, you're now at a point of implementing new ways of working with your suppliers. How are you going to mature the process, and what are the top 3 challenges you're facing next year in 2022?
Yeah, Steve, that's a good question. I mean, first and foremost, we're going to start using our newly established supplier management framework that Matt, was talking about. That, we've been working with the State of Flux team, over the past year or so to build out this framework, and we've just recently rolled it out throughout the enterprise, and we're looking forward to leveraging that a whole lot more to try to really align our function a lot more, align our business, get our practitioners tools in their hands that are more industry leading supplier management process practices, and really just try to build up that consistency that we've probably struggled to have historically. I think looking forward, we're gonna we plan to really take a step back and look at where we are today as an organization with regards to our supplier management practices, looking at our current strategic relationships, looking at our supplier segmentations, and really assessing whether those make sense, whether those are really truly what we see going forward. Take a look at how we've historically engaged some of those strategic suppliers. Has that engagement truly been where we need it to be, and is it extracting value that we need it to? So that's probably the first opportunity, in the near term, is to begin leveraging the good work that our team has been putting together over the past 8 or 9 months or so. So we're looking forward to that. I definitely think we're going to have some challenges, going forward. I really do see this as it's not the end. We've just started beginning of a lot of the work that's ahead, and some of the challenges that I see. First and foremost, we all have competing priorities. All the business units, all our stakeholders, all our business partners have competing priorities and a limited number of resources. And trying to determine how we prioritize what elements of the supplier management framework we really go after and we focus more on is going to be a bit of a challenge. Making sure that we have the adequate resources to be able to focus the right amount of effort to truly enhance that program. That's always going to be on the horizon. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for us to pursue and to go after. We can't do everything, and we can't do everything in the near term. We have to recognize that this is going to be more of a marathon and not a sprint with an overnight, success. So we're just starting this journey. We're going to have to truly pace ourselves, identify what makes sense to address in the near term, and look at a shaping plan on where we want to be here in the next several years and into the longer term. I think Alan kind of alluded to a little bit of this in his comments. Ensuring that we're aligned with our business partners, our business owners and stakeholders is going to be, I don't want to say necessarily a challenge, but it's certainly going to be something that's a very important aspect. We're going to need to make sure that those business owners and our stakeholders are where the rubber hits the road with the suppliers. They have the daily interactions with the suppliers, making sure that they're aligned with the spirit and the intent of our overall supplier management value proposition and the value and the program is going to be important. And looking at our framework, collaboration is at the very heart of our framework. And to truly be successful in this and with this framework, we're going to have to truly partner closely with our business owners, with our stakeholders, to really stay aligned on the value proposition and what the business needs to get out of a supplier management program, what they truly see as value. So that'll be an important aspect that we're going to need to make sure we cover. And then, lastly, I think really building out that consistency and truly elevating our organizational capability within our practitioners, with our stakeholders, is going to be certainly a challenge. It's not going to be, you flip on the switch and all of a sudden, bam, we're doing supplier management and we're doing it well. It's going to take time. We're going to have to identify the key competencies of supplier management. We're going to have to truly understand where our proficiency levels are of our practitioners, of our stakeholders are, map out where they are now and where they need to be, build out a training program, build out some of that OC to, you know, either strengthen what we're doing well or even close some gaps. And, you know, doing that, it's going to be important to do that, because doing that is going to serve as an enabler for a sustainable supplier management program in the longer term. We certainly don't want to stand up a program here and in a couple of years it's something completely different. We want that long-term stability. So doing that, closing out those organizational gaps and strengthening the skills is going to be really important. But you know, it's going to take time. We recognize that. Again, we recognize this is going to be an evolution. We're on a marathon. We're going to pace ourselves and stay on the journey. So, yeah,
That's right. It's an evolution, not a revolution. So
exactly. Well said.
Justin, Matt, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us today. We do have that Q&A coming up, so will you stay with us for that 20-minute session at the end?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, excellent. Thank you so much. Audience, just a reminder to please keep those questions coming through. And now we'd like to wind the clock forward a bit and explore some mid-journey obstacles and how to keep a program on track while sustaining the interest of your suppliers. At American Electric Power, developing supplier management capability was the first part of a broader procurement and supply chain management transformation to help deliver on their mission to define the future of energy and develop innovative solutions that power communities and improve lives. AEP is now training practitioners and implementing their enhanced supplier management practices across a range of categories and suppliers. Please welcome Evelyn Henley Shields, Supplier Relationship Program Manager, and Judd Schumacher, Managing Director, Procurement and Supply Chain Ops. Evelyn and Judd are not able to join us by video today due to some technical difficulties, but they will be on by voice, which should be just fine. Are you guys on?
Hey,
Yep,
thanks
can
for
you hear me?
having us.
Awesome. Hi, both. Thanks for being a part of the panel today. So similar to our first question for Chevron, we've been working with AP for some time now, but how did your supplier management journey begin?
Hey, thanks for asking, Steve. And it's not going to be a lot different than what Justin described. So at AEP, we moved to a category management structure. And in 2014, we laid out a roadmap to grow maturity in sourcing. And we focused on the category management and strategic sourcing. And now we're trying to mature upon the execution of those processes with the supplier relationship management program. Just like Justin described, we're doing ad hoc activities within State of Flux's definition for SRM. But to the extent of the discipline of the contract, performance, and risk management, we weren't doing it consistently. We had strong sourcing and category management leaders. They were doing elements of SRM. And so we've been doing an informal version for several years. But now we're really working hard to look at it collectively rather than individually. And today, it's more about building a stronger foundation for strong sourcing and category management that has a disciplined execution of those strategies. So probably formally in the procurement organization, SRM started with the relationship we started back with State of Flux in 2017. We did the voice of the supplier, we did the maturity assessment, and then we conducted some pilots in 2019. More recently, in 2020, SRM became part of AEP's business strategy. So we're starting to build understanding and support at an executive level of what we're trying to achieve as far as value goes. And so becoming a part of our business strategy and a breakthrough objective for our organization, the visibility and support has been fantastic. And now we're working hard to deliver on value. I would also say that the pilots were a big catalyst to the understanding of the value it brings. It really brought, visibility to, we can source the purchase price to death and we can develop category strategies, but we're leaving on the table by not acting with more discipline around our suppliers. And now we're working to mature that process and get alignment in our business unit with our goals.
Great. Now your CEO has a strategic vision for AEP. Can you articulate how you see supplier management contributing or supporting that vision over the next 5 years?
Yeah, Stephen, I can take that one. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with you guys today. This is my first engagement in your panel discussion, so I appreciate it. Our CEO's vision is pretty simple. I think you even mentioned it in your overview. It's around to power a new and brighter future for our customers and communities. So pretty simple. Generally speaking, though, I feel that traditional utilities like AEP, those who historically generate and transmit and distribute electricity, are typically laggards in the industry. In part, I think there's been this monopolistic or oligopolistic, if that's a word, attitude that's driven very different behaviors and beliefs within our industry into this almost paternalistic culture where we always know what's best for our customers. We always have the solution for our customers. And I think when you couple this with the fact that we're a highly regulated business that has a proven formula for recovery, and you have a business model really ultimately that will become extinct if we don't change the way we procure goods and services or establish relationships in a way that helps us deliver our product to the customer in a more competitive way. And I believe SRM can be a foundation enabler to changing that business model over time. The good news is, similar to my colleagues in the gas and oil industry there, I think we're in a period of unprecedented change within our industry. Clean energy, reliable energy, and most importantly, affordable energy are now the demands of our customers and communities we serve. And what that means is there's really no headroom in the states we serve, at least, for those rate increases. There's significant or steep fines if we don't keep the lights on. And customers, frankly, want choice in how their energy is produced. So right there, I think, lies our opportunity to bring value to our stakeholders, who are those customers, communities, and of course our investors, through the discipline, as Evelyn referenced, of SRM. I would say cost reduction and price, and the price we pay for goods and services, will certainly increase the affordability of our product, which is electric. But beyond this, we think SRM, once understood and most importantly adopted, I'll say that again, once understood and most importantly adopted, will lead us to greater value in the quality of our equipment and delivery of our services in a way that truly helps us realize that vision our CEO set out to power a new and brighter future for our customers and communities.
Understood and adopted. That's a good way of putting it. You've been keen to involve and promote the role of the business managers, the business in managing supplier relationships. What do you believe are the advantages of this approach versus retaining it as a traditional procurement role?
I really love this question, Steve, because it really is about people and how they engage with each other. In order for AEP to be successful to execute on the energy transformation that Judd's describing, we need to all work together as a team towards that vision. You know, we bring up competing priorities of our business. So how do we align those priorities and understand how they're driving the ultimate vision of the organization? So our business units each have their own mission to support the energy transformation. But the procurement team needs to collaborate with those business units on that strategy for the supply chain enablement of their mission. So we all really need to work together. And, you know, the ways of human culture, they inform us on the perspective of, you know, how we organize people in their work, how we define those social networks, and how we classify the world is a crucial impact on how we function with each other. And that includes at work with our coworkers, our colleagues, and our suppliers. The silos that arise out of the way we classify and organize people becomes the natural way of doing things. And so by creating the responsibility in the business unit for the execution of the procurement strategy, we increase the chance of executing on that business unit's mission, because they're going to be keen to pay attention on that strategy and how it supports the mission. And then it creates horizontal alignment across those business verticals so that they're all rowing in the same direction. You know, Justin talked about aligning on value and how they go after it. And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve with the different roles and responsibilities and the discipline and rigor around that. It means our procurement strategy has to support the business, and the business is responsible for executing on the strategy. And so we all have to collaborate with each other in order to get there. And so the disciplined engagement model is crucial to us, and having that role in the business rather than this is a procurement thing, this is an AEP thing. So we're all working together on the energy transformation. And as Judd said, this is one of those foundational pieces that'll help us get there. And the hard work is really around getting it understood and adopted. I like that too, Judd. Thank you, Steve. That was an excellent question.
Yeah, so with that being said, we have one last question for you. What would you say are the top 3 areas of value you hope to achieve by delivering on this vision?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think hope being the key word for me. We are obviously in the, growing this program, so we have a lot of hope out there, and I think Evelyn can attest. We have a lot of debates really within our organization on what exactly does value mean. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and frankly, I've just landed on a definition of, what does our customer get to experience as a consequence of our service, and whether that's perceived or real. And that can take many different forms, from hard savings to mitigating, market risk. We've dealt with that over the past, year, or as simple as ensuring we're getting the full benefit of any contractual arrangement. Again, since I consider our program in the growth stage and still maturing, I'm hopeful that we'll benefit in a couple of areas. Number one is hard to get there, but it's really speaking with one voice to our key suppliers in the program. AEP, like many of the companies on this call, my colleagues on this call, is a complex organization across many different states. We have various operating companies that operate across those states, and hundreds of stakeholders out there. So with implementing SRM, we are working on getting our senior executives, frankly, to focus on the benefits of what it means to speak with one voice to our suppliers, and the mutual benefits, or the leverage, if you will, that results from simply channeling or focusing that communication through an SRM function. The second is probably around the elevation of procurement within the organization as a true partner internally, and taking the lead role in facilitating, because that is what we do, strategic alignment between what our business unit needs and what our key suppliers can deliver. If there's not an alignment there, there's going to be difficulty in getting to your goals. Probably the best example, we're now experiencing, some of those benefits from our early SRM pilots, where engineering innovation out of our joint business plan has resulted in some new designs that optimize our structures, which are used to transmit, energy long distances, resulting in standardization and ultimately a lower total cost of ownership. It's not easy. It's taken years to do, but these are real results that we can report out and really sell to the executives to get on board and bring that focus in. So, and lastly, I'll just mention, we're a publicly traded company. So earnings per share are extremely important to our investors and obviously the street. I think the most current formula we use, at least, is, every $7 million saved or cost can be avoided, there's a penny of earnings. So, beyond just getting something at a lower cost, we really have to find ways to extract value out of the entire supply chain that supports what we do for a living. And ultimately, that has to contribute to our earnings per share. I think Alan mentioned at the start of this, organizations through SRM are experiencing a 3 to 6% benefit. I would take 3 to 6% increase on earnings per share, and frankly, I think our shareholders would too. So that would be my 3 areas, Steve.
Okay. Awesome. Some really great information you both have shared with us today. Thank you for talking with me. Like Chevron, would you have some time to stick around for a Q&A session at the end?
Yep.
Awesome. Great. Thank you both. All right. We've had some really good questions come through, so please continue to use that question pane to submit them. And right now we'll move on in the journey and really start to understand how to grow value and enhance your suppliers' experience in working with your organization. I'd like to now introduce our last guests. Kellogg's relies on over 20,000 suppliers from around the world every day. Through building relationships with selected key suppliers, they work together for mutual benefit and to drive a competitive advantage. Their K Partners Advantage program ensures that procurement and R&D work together on these relationships, focusing on big ticket value drivers like innovation. As they mature their supplier management function, technology is playing a key role in how Kellogg's communicates with these suppliers. Please welcome Leslie Lauterbaugh, Director of Supplier Engagement and Development, and George Sherian, Director of External Partnerships. Hi, and a big welcome to you both.
Hi, thanks, Steve. Glad to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
So for our first question, the K Partners Advantage program for strategic suppliers is really an interesting concept. If you could, explain what it is and how R&D works with procurement to sponsor those relationships.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that question. I'm excited to join the discussion today to share some of the exciting work we're doing on our K Partner program. We truly count them as partners and not merely as suppliers, and that's the way we call them. They are our partners. We strongly believe for us to face the complexities and the challenges of a changing world, we cannot operate in isolation or in vacuum. We have to build, as Alan mentioned, strong and robust relationship with our partners, and that's where the K Partner Advantage program helps us, where we are combining both procurement and R&D functions, work together to identify partners that are strategic to us, help us achieve our long-term growth plans, and also drive both top-line and bottom-line growth. The approach we use to identify our partners involve a rigorous segmentation process. We go through segmentation of all our partners, and we categorize them as strategic, developmental, core, or opportunistic. The strategic partners are the ones that have significant business impact. This includes Kellogg spend and service criticality, and also partner capabilities. For our strategic partners that we have identified, we assign relationship managers, and relationship managers come from both R&D teams and also from procurement teams. In addition to that, we also have assigned executive sponsors that come from both R&D and procurement leadership teams. And the expectation that we have from our strategic partners is to have one or more big bets or projects that have high NSV and are strategic to the business. They don't necessarily have to be R&D projects. They could be supply chain projects also. And what we do as a joint function is basically we have R&D managers and procurement relationship managers coordinate the joint business planning meetings. And also during the joint business planning meeting, there's an open and honest conversation on the projects that we are collaborating on and what are things that we could do to make the relationship stronger and better. And the other thing that I would like to point out is the JBP discussions that we have are global in nature. So because we have different regions that are part of the program, so it becomes we involve R&D teams and procurement teams from all over the globe in the JBP meeting. The other thing that I would like to highlight is we also celebrate the successes that we have with our K partners. Just last month, the procurement team and the R&D team collaborated on an Innovation Day Expo. It was virtual this year due to COVID, where we invited 12 of our strategic partners to share success stories they had with us in 2020 and 2021. We invited the whole Kellogg network to join the virtual meeting, and it was a huge success. And this showcase also helped us inspire our partners to listen to what other partners are doing. So it was a cross-pollination of ideas. We are hoping to do that in person next year if the conditions allow. In summary, I think it's a joint collaboration
with procurement and R&D and all and the other key functions that can make the K Partner Advantage program successful.
Okay. So what do suppliers get out of being in the K Partners Advantage program, and how are they incentivized to keep coming up with ideas?
Well, Steve, first and foremost, they get to work with me. So I think that's enough for most suppliers, but there are a few other advantages as well. The suppliers in our K Partners program, I'll sum it up to say they get access and exposure. So it's access to information, to our Kellogg leadership, to different people resources. George mentioned there's executive sponsors, there's R&D relationship managers, there's procurement managers, and they also get a very formal governance around both joint business planning and supplier performance management. So we have very limited resources as a company, just like everyone these days. We're doing more and more with a lot less. And so that's why our segmentation, which is essentially deciding with whom we're going to spend those resources, is so very important. Alan mentioned that there's a variety of elements that can be measured within the segmentation process. We have 7, not 10 to 15. So I guess I probably need to up my game in that area. But one of the elements for Kellogg is having aligned priorities with our suppliers, and that's across innovation, financials, ops, ESG, you name it. And in order for that alignment to occur, suppliers need to have a pretty intimate knowledge of where our company is going and our growth goals and our ESG commitments and whatnot. And then George mentioned our K Partners Innovation Expo. This is another type of incentive, giving exposure to our suppliers, celebrating successes across the Kellogg company with maybe regions or businesses or functions that don't already work with them. So this inspires additional project inspiration, right? And thoughts on how we can grow even further with those partners and leverage their capabilities.
And just to build on what Leslie said, we also provide them insights on our future pipeline. So they have early visibility to what we are looking at for the future. So.
Great. Now, last year, Leslie, at our summit, you mentioned the need for agility and flexibility with more frequent communication with your suppliers. How is technology now enabling that for you at Kellogg's?
Did I say that, Steve? I'm pretty sure you probably have that on recording, so I'm sure I said that. I'm gonna tweak my messaging a little bit today. So one of the most important elements for supplier relationship management is the flow of information. So whether that comes from a personal communication, a meeting, a repository of data, or otherwise, having relevant information at the right time is what enables everything from continuity of supply to innovation projects, so that everything is aligned to our company goals and strategy. So I'm shifting my message a bit from just more frequent communication to the consistent and timely sharing of relevant information. Maybe that's communication, maybe it's something else. So in terms of digital enablement, we have this wonderful thing called email, which has become this haystack for which all of my important information seem to become needles and get completely lost. We have our phone, we have our video conferencing, we have our IMs, which is great if you and your other critical parties can actually carve out the time together, which is becoming harder and harder to do. We can't have people be hurdles to the exchange of that information wherever possible. So we're trying to transition to a pull versus push system. A top priority of enhancing our tech with a supplier collaboration system is for that automatic and continued flow of information. So both Kellogg and supplier are looking at one source of truth for data, and neither party is waiting for that phone call or email or IM or meeting when we can all come together to talk about something. If I need to know that a delivery did not make it to that plant, I need to be able as a supplier to look that up, right? And to make sure I know everything that is going on, all the details around it and what I have to do to fix it. I might be waiting for somebody to get out of their 8-hour training event in order to actually get that phone call from the Kellogg procurement ops person. That's what we're trying to eliminate, and that's what we're hoping that the tech will do for us.
Cool. So as you enable the continual flow of information and roll out technology globally for on time in full and for performance measurement, sorry, what are your top 3 lookouts to getting it right and ensuring a smooth transition?
So the highlight here is no matter how good your tech tool might be, your program is only going to be as good as the people who are managing it, the resources that are using or not using that technology. And that goes both for the customer, your organization, and the supplier. So I have some critical tips. They all pertain to change management and mitigating the effect of that revolving door of corporate technology and tools that we're all used to. It goes hand in hand with something Alan was saying, one of the key takeaways from State of Flux research is train your people, right? So I'll talk about bringing those people along with you on the journey. Justin, you used the term practitioner in Chevron's segment just earlier. I love that term. I'm going to steal it. Our buyers, our R&D, our other cross-functional partners, they are practitioners of SRM. So they need to be just as good as our managers, as our SRM tool. So 3 tips. The first one is to start with small bites of change. So that might mean starting with 1 geographic location, 1 business, a subset of categories, or maybe it means you're going to start with your most strategic suppliers or those buyers in your organization that will actually champion the change. In Kellogg's situation, we completed a limited time pilot with one of our regions. We stepped away. We made time for deliberation on where and how to launch. And we also incorporated some customizations in the tool that will ensure that our processes are very familiar to those users, right? It still looks and feels familiar to what we're doing already. My tip number 2 is to over communicate and to carefully communicate throughout the process. New technology that has true benefit and real streamlining of communication will still start out feeling like it's incremental work for people because they have to learn something new. And it's key to ensure that our stakeholders and our users understand the need for change and the reason to believe and how they fit into the solution. And then lastly, my final tip is to figure out how to share success that's attributed to your SRM improvements. It's sometimes really difficult to tie a benefit directly to an SRM program or a technology. But wherever you can, sharing the good feedback from users, the small wins, the from tos that you experience, all of these things are really critical, not for the initial adoption of the tool, but for the process to be sustainable. So SRM does not hang its hat on grabbing the low-hanging fruit and the short-term successes. We heard the phrase, it's a marathon already today. It's looking about strategically into the future. We're building a foundation for results that will come in years to come. So we need to all be all in for the long term.
Yeah. And collecting those success stories. So
Yes.
Great. Well, hey, we very much appreciate you both being here today. Chevron, AP, Kellogg's, thanks again for sharing your journeys with us. There's been a lot of great discussion, and I hope our audience enjoyed hearing from you all as much as I did. So if you could now be so kind to come back on camera. I'd like to turn it over to Alan for some Q&A from the audience, and we'll also circle back on that poll that we sent out earlier. So thanks again, and I'll hand it over to you, Alan.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks to all the panelists. Fantastic. I've been scribbling notes while you've all been talking. So, and Leslie, just to confirm, yes, we love working with you as well. That is a key part of the benefit of working with Kellogg's is getting to work with you. So, as you pointed out at the beginning of your talk, we've got some great questions coming through on the chat. I will try and share them around for you all. I think rather than sort of too much technology to begin with, we've got one question around joint account plans, how people define them. So a lot of you are kind of used. I might pick on you, Leslie and George, to cover that off, and then we'll throw it over to the other panelists as well.
I'm so sorry, Alan, you were breaking up a bit for
Yes.
me.
How do you define your joint account plans or joint business plans, please?
Alan, we are having trouble hearing you well. I don't know what's going on from an audio standpoint.
People hearing me?
Better now.
Try again. It might have cleared up now.
Leslie, did you catch that question?
I didn't.
Oh, sorry. I was just asking about how you define your joint business plan, please.
How we define joint business planning. I think I caught it that time. Yeah, so joint business planning. Okay, yeah. So joint. Let me know if I'm on the right track, if I got the question right.
I was asking about joint business plans, and you didn't. Steve, can you pick this up?
I think I'm good. So I'll start talking, and you guys can give me the thumbs up if I've got it right. So I'll talk a little bit about our joint business planning program at Kellogg. We define joint business planning as a continuous process throughout the year where we're making sure that those big transformational projects with suppliers are aligned between both the supplier and the Kellogg company. There is one big culmination event, at least one per year, where leaders come together and make sure that they are conquering hurdles for those what we call big bets, or they're employing the appropriate resources to support those big bets. Or maybe we need to reprioritize and those big transformational projects need to change. So there is this one big formal event that we call the JBP, but it's really a process that is 12 months out of the year where we're connecting cross-functionally between Kellogg and our suppliers that are in the K Partners program and making sure that we're doing the vetting out of those projects and the return on investment and making sure that we have buy-in from appropriate parties. And sometimes we talk about different topics. What's hot and what's now? I'll tell you right now, it's all about continuity of supply and trying to thwart the inflation that is coming our way for 2022 and beyond. But we balance that out with these longer term strategic missions that our companies are aligned to. So it's a mix of very formal governance with the everyday, contact to contact brainstorming sessions and business justification and operational type meetings that we have.
It's always forward looking. We would like the partners to bring ideas to us of the technologies that they are developing also. So it's basically an open discussion on technologies that they have and technologies that we have within our company. So it's a very open and honest discussion.
Okay, I think, Alan, it looks like you're still having some problems with your audio and video. Let me jump in here. I can ask you guys some of these. Do you have a formal process to capture innovation? And I think this was directed towards AEP.
I'm happy to take that one, Steve. We do have a formal process for collecting innovation. It's called Achieving Excellence. However, we are working to determine how to pull our suppliers' ideas into that process. So how do we collect ideas that we funnel directly from our employees? So getting those ideas from the suppliers into that mix through joint business planning and collaborative activities is one of the goals of that program.
Okay, great. Let's see here. How do you measure success of a supplier collaboration strategy / initiative? This might be another one for you, Chevron, or sorry, AEP.
Hey, Steve, could you repeat that? Sorry.
Yep, so how do you measure success of a supplier collaboration strategy / initiative?
Yeah, so I think it comes out, it depends really on what level of supplier you're managing and what you set out to do over the next year. Where I think folks might fail is you have 400 metrics that you want to measure. You don't have, a strategic vision of how you see that relationship in the next year or the next 3 years or 5 years. And you have really no framework that you're working towards in terms of what you want to accomplish. I think it needs to be simple. There's, 3 things we want to focus on over the next year or 2. And then longer term, we want to focus on this. So to me, it's pretty simple.
Great.
Evelyn, feel free to add, but.
No, I thought that was great. I think it's about making sure that your tactical work is aligned to the vision. And how do you know when you arrive and what can you measure on your way to get there? And I think that if you get to the outcomes that you set out to get to, or the revised outcomes that you determine through collaboration and effort, that's how you measure it. I think the KPIs are just a tool to get there.
Great. We have one for Chevron. Would be great to understand how Chevron's Center of Excellence team is enabling your business owners.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that one or take a stab at it. And I think, it's different approaches. I mean, we absolutely support our procurement practitioners in our business units, and then their natural customers are individuals in the field. So I think, it starts with understanding what their critical priorities are. And, rather than ourselves, figuring out what's important to the business, is really collaborating with themselves to understand what's really going to move the needle and drive value. So I think ultimately that collaboration is critical, and then it's really developing kind of the tools and the guidance and the mechanisms by which they can influence those business outcomes. And I think that's really where we're kind of focusing on our efforts with our business customers.
Great. So I have one that I can throw out to everyone. How many suppliers do you manage closely through the SRM process, and how many resources are involved? So whoever wants to take this one.
I could start. We have anywhere from around 250 to 300 suppliers that we would consider part of our SRM program holistically. And then of that, we have, maybe less than 50 that we would call K partners, which are actually getting the most access and exposure and resources from Kellogg. How many resources are involved in those like top 50? it could be 10 to 12 different resources across the business that are working closely with those particular suppliers. And that includes procurement resources, R&D, exec leadership, sustainability, engineering, right? The list goes on and on.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think from Chevron, I mean, those numbers seem fairly familiar in terms of kind of what we consider enterprise. So those suppliers that are really managed collaboratively between our global teams and teams in the business unit. So, you know, that 50 plus number is probably where we are at currently. And then I think as you extend supply management into individual business units, managing suppliers locally in the various countries that we operate, obviously that gets magnified, you know, significantly, and you probably look at a similar number of suppliers in those individual business units. So certainly not in the hundreds, but you know, it can be substantial as you look across the enterprise.
Yeah, and from AEP, we're working on 15 that represent probably about 1.5 billion in spend within the across the enterprise, and probably about 25 people who are supporting currently. And then our tranches are 15 suppliers a year over the next 2 years. So those are kind of our numbers right now. Again, we're just really launching it this year.
You know, and my advice would be, if you're looking at how to segment, how to resource, I wouldn't start out with a number in mind, right? Do the segmentation of your suppliers and understand what suppliers do you have that would benefit, right? That would mutually benefit from the type of governance that SRM employs, right? If you have growth potential with 10 suppliers, then it's 10 suppliers. If you have growth potential or the ability, you know, for customer, you know, benefits with 300 suppliers, then it's 300 suppliers, right? And just knowing if you can't resource against that, then that's the opportunity that you're missing out on.
Yeah, Leslie, this is Judd. I would only add to that. What we're finding is some of our business units, we're getting a real pull. Others, we've got to push in. And so trying to, number one, get aligned with those that we have a pull from, because those are going to champion it for us. And then also figuring out capacity wedges in terms of if we build it and they come, can we continue to serve them in that SRM capacity? So we're learning along the way too.
And the new flow of people into both procurement and those businesses will provide ongoing opportunity for you to continue to sell in SRM.
Yeah.
All right. We have a new one that just came in. When you started to define your different partners, did you have to do partners? What did you have to do internally between those you would consider strategic and not based on the feedback of suppliers after the voice of the supplier? I'm not sure if that's very clear here. Yeah. Let's skip that one actually for now. Sorry about that. Do you have a reward system for your suppliers?
The reward is the opportunity for business. Really, we used to have a system where we would give supplier awards and recognition formally. And we still think there are benefits to that, and we may get back to that. But what we have been finding is, as much as those recognitions are, you know, are great and they're recognized and they're appreciated, what it comes down to is what's important to the supplier, and it's typically longevity of relationship, right? And getting the type of access to information that's going to allow them to put their best foot forward during an RFP situation or during any potential growth opportunity. So that is really, right now, Kellogg doesn't have a specific reward program other than, we all understand and can showcase the benefits that suppliers have gotten out of being a part of SRM and in participating in it two-way, right? It's not just Kellogg giving the feedback and hosting sessions and collaborating, but it is also the supplier coming back and understanding the access that they have and leveraging it appropriately and pulling from us where they need to.
Hey, Steve, I couldn't agree with Leslie more. AP does not have a formal rewards program. To be quite frank, we probably haven't matured enough to put one in place. But my advice would be the same. With our pilots that we've been running for 3 years, the supplier is so grateful for the collaboration and the process that we put in place. They talk earnestly about the improvements it made to their business, the alignment that it created with our internal business unit that's collaborating with them. And they've been able to push those improvements down through their supply chain and their tier ones and tier twos, which is the dream. So all of those suppliers in that chain are working towards shared goals that they have with AEP. And it just brings value. It brings good culture. It makes work fun. We transition from firefighting meetings to proactive planning meetings. I would say the reward is in the work itself.
Something that can be much more motivating than a reward is showing folks where they stand against the rest of their peers. So we do sometimes anonymously show scoring of supplier measurements and where they stand in terms of other peer companies in the same industries as them that are our suppliers as well. And that can be very motivating because if you have strategic suppliers, they want to be, right, best of the best.
Yeah, Steve, I mean, for Chevron, I know we're, pretty early on in the journey compared with AEP and Kellogg's, but historically, we haven't ever had a reward system for our suppliers or anything, but I do foresee us, in the future. I think the reward is very aligned with what Leslie was saying. The reward is in, being a bit of a partner of choice. The reward comes from the intangible value that, the suppliers getting access and access to executives, access to leadership, access to the information, having opportunities to further grow their business in ways that may not have necessarily been on the horizon early on, but in the longer term. So I think there's some intangible values, intangible rewards that would come out of having this strengthened collaboration and strengthening these relationships.
Great. Yeah, thank you all for taking that one. So I got a little clarification on the last one. And this is for those who have done a voice of the supplier. Did the results from the voice of the supplier change views of the supplier internally? So basically, you thought that you were a strategic partner, results of survey came back, you're actually not with a certain supplier. Did it change the way you perceive them? Did you have to resegment maybe based on what you uncovered through the voice of the supplier?
Steve, for us at AEP, we did the voice of the supplier in 2017 as we were doing our maturity assessment. And, just to go back to something Leslie said is you got to communicate broadly often and bring things forward. And I would suggest that AEP could have done more to bring the results of the voice of the supplier to the table. As we started exploring our pilots, we really siloed that information in procurement. Although we did pull out those results recently to discuss the importance of the customer of choice attribute with your suppliers. And it struck home, and I think that we're in a more mature place in the conversation with folks outside of the procurement organization, that the next time we do the voice of the supplier, which is I hope in 2022, that we'll be able to more effectively utilize those results I think maybe procurement was less surprised than the business unit would be, just based on anecdotal evidence of my experience.
Great.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I like it because, you know, segmentation is about your company evaluating the supplier, right, and their behaviors towards your company. And voice of the supplier adds in the element of what does the supplier, right, think of your relationship. And gosh darn it, you would really like to think that they should be the same. If you think you have a strategic supplier, you would really think that that supplier views Kellogg as a strategic partner as well. But that is not always the case. I think our Kellogg results, by and large, were what was expected. But certainly, I think less through voice of the supplier and more through the challenges that the pandemic has brought forth. We have found out there are certainly some suppliers that we would have thought were strategic, that maybe we didn't end up getting that customer of choice benefit that we thought we would, and vice versa. So when rubber really hits the road and you need to get that delivery in, or you have something critical that has to get done in a timely manner by the right resource at the right time, has to get escalated, whatever the case might be, that's when you really find out if you are truly strategic or otherwise with a supplier. That might not even show up when you're having a top-to-top discussion, right? Both companies and suppliers can talk the talk that you're strategic, but it's really about the actions that come out of it.
Great. Okay, I have one last question to whoever wants to take it. How would you best position an investment in supplier management technology if your firm does not have an enterprise-wide supplier management program?
We can only pick one.
Does anyone want to take that?
All right, I was giving the time in case anyone else wanted to, because I know you guys are just hearing me talk a lot. So how would I position the investment in technology when maybe you don't have the depth or the expanse of a holistic supplier relationship management program? Okay, honestly, my advice would be, instead of pushing for that investment in tech, start in pushing for that investment in the resources to get yourself the holistic SRM program. You need to start out with the governance and the buy-in of the people who are managing relationships to understand the importance of communication, of data flow, of sharing each other's strategy and objectives. You have to do a segmentation. How are you going to use technology when you don't know what suppliers, what businesses, what categories are going to be most important to use that technology for? I really do see the technology as that further enabling step to take the SRM program that you do have to the next level, right? And make it more streamlined and use less resources. That's kind of where my head's at, that you want to start out with delivering that SRM program, showing the value of SRM in different ways, and then getting that investment, getting some dollars behind it.
Steve, I'll comment. Chevron was kind of going down this path. I mean, I really kind of see that's a tough question. Without a supplier management program, and if you're chasing after an investment in some supplier management technology without a program in place, I think you need to ask yourself whether you might be putting the cart before the horse. And I say that because, I really think that you need to, the purpose of technology is to really serve as an enabler of a program. You don't really want to build a program around your technology. Your technology needs to help support whatever program you have. That's the purpose of a tool. And Chevron was kind of in that position a little bit. We were going down the path of looking at technologies without necessarily of this formalized supplier management framework. And I think we realized we were kind of in danger of, again, I'll go back to that analogy, putting the cart before the horse, and we were in danger of building potentially a program around a technology when you really need to use the technology as a tool, as an enabler to a larger scale of a framework and what you're of the value proposition of what you're really trying to do. And so, you know, we paused that. We took a pause there and said, hang on for a second, time out. Let's take a look at our framework. Let's take a look at our program. Let's build out that value proposition first and get aligned on what do we really want to get out of supplier management? What do we want to get from this? And then let's identify a technology solution that can help enable what we're trying to do there. And getting in that order, I think we feel a lot better about the direction in our supplier management evolution. So, you know, it's a tough question. It's a great question. I got to admit, you need to probably consider building the program out before you kind of identify the technology, because otherwise you're in danger of building a program around a technology, and that may not be necessarily the best approach. For what it's worth, my 2 cents on that, because we were almost down that path.
This is AEP. I would 100% agree with both of their responses.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you all. I think Alan's back to close out the day. So thanks again for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and answer some questions that we had from the audience. So huge thank you. Alan, are you back?
Hopefully, Steve, can everyone hear me?
There is a bit of a lag with voice.
Okay, well, apologies about earlier and technical challenges. I'll look at our supplier of choice for GoToWebinar, but firstly, thank you to all the amazing panelists and speakers. It's hugely appreciated, and of course, all those that dialed in for today's session. I think the key thing that I want to get across to you is, and as I mentioned, get your business case into your CEO now. Whether you use your technology as your Trojan horse to get the whole supply management program invested in, or whether you and bear in mind, getting investment versus rollout as 2 different things. But equally, I would say your time is now to get that business case in. Look at there was a few questions coming through about the technology, and we're happy to show people what we have in terms of technology, and make sure you talk to us about your training and teams. It was interesting from the poll, the key things that were coming through really were risk, supplier management, supplier innovation, and new value. Cost reduction, not so much. So your poll today, those were the key things that came through. So make sure you use those to help in terms of that business case. But I think you'll find that both technology and training, like Leslie mentioned, it's the combination of the people and the technology that make it work is critical. And finally, you'll get an email from us. Make sure you download this year's report. Yeah, please make sure you do that. Have a good read and ask us lots of questions. We love hearing questions, so please send them through as once you've read the report, and we'd love to continue the dialogue. I think, Christine, you've got one last slide for the team before we shut off, right on time, hopefully.
Yep. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Just wrapping up here. I actually got quite a bit out of this today, so I want to thank all of our panelists for attending. It was really a great conversation. So we have a couple of things coming your way. We have an email that will have a link to the research report. Another email should show up shortly with the webinar on demand. And if you did submit any questions that didn't get answered, we'll reach out to you individually with some answers. And we really love feedback. So please complete the post-event feedback form to make sure that we can make these sessions as valuable as possible. And don't hesitate to contact us to find out more about State of Flux and supplier relationship management. We're here for you. Thanks a lot.